Have you ever woken up and realized that the years of your life are no longer your own? That every day feels like you're living for everyone else, especially your children, while your own dreams, desires, and well-being are pushed aside? You're not alone. As we age, many of us fall into the trap of sacrificing ourselves for the sake of others. But here's the hard truth. You deserve more than just giving everything away. Your time, energy, and happiness are just as important as anyone else's, and it's time to claim them back. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to lose sight of who you are, especially when the people you love need so much from you. But what if I told you that living your later years with peace, joy, and purpose is not only possible, it's your birthright? What if the wisdom of Buddhism could help you break free from the invisible chains of guilt and obligation that have held you back? The Buddha's teachings remind us that life is not about endless sacrifice. It's about finding balance, living with intention, and embracing the present moment. You've spent so much of your life caring for others, but now it's time to care for yourself. In the next few minutes, we'll explore 6 transformative Buddhist principles that will guide you to reclaim your independence, protect your peace, and step into your golden years with dignity and fulfillment. This isn't just about surviving, it's about truly living. Let's dive in. Lesson 1. Setting clear boundaries. The art of self-respect. Have you ever felt like your life has been hijacked by the demands of others, especially your children? That somehow your own needs take a backseat to their never-ending requests? It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that, as a parent, your role is to be forever available, to drop everything and be at their beck and call. But let me ask you this: when did you stop being the most important person in your own life? In Buddhist philosophy, one of the most profound teachings is the concept of mindfulness, and within that, the art of setting boundaries. The Buddha encouraged us to be mindful of how we spend our energy, time, and emotional resources. Just as a river has banks to channel its flow, we too need boundaries to preserve our life force and inner peace. Let me tell you the story of Robert. Robert was a 72-year-old father who was loved by his children, but over time, he had become their go-to person for everything. Babysitting grandchildren, managing family affairs, fixing problems, Robert was always there. At first, he felt good about helping. It was a way for him to feel needed, a way for him to remain relevant in his family's life. But after years of this, he began to feel drained, as if he had given up his own life in exchange for theirs. He had no time for his own hobbies, his own interests, or even just a quiet moment for himself. One day, Robert had an epiphany. He had been neglecting himself for far too long. In that moment, he remembered the Buddhist principle of balance. The Buddha taught that life is about finding the middle way, not too much, not too little. It wasn't selfish for Robert to reclaim his time, so he sat down with his children and gently told them, "I love helping, but I need time for myself. I can't keep giving up my life for yours." His children were surprised at first, but they respected his decision. And do you know what happened next? They adapted. They found other solutions. And Robert, for the first time in years, began to feel the joy of living for himself again. Buddha reminds us that healthy relationships are based on mutual respect, and that includes respecting your own time, energy, and needs. By setting clear boundaries, you are not rejecting your children, but instead teaching them how to respect you. Boundaries don't push people away, they create space for love to flourish. And when you have that space, you create room for your own happiness to bloom. So I invite you to reflect on your own life. Are you constantly saying yes out of guilt or a sense of obligation? When was the last time you said no in a way that honored your own needs. Setting boundaries is not just an act of self-care, it is an act of wisdom. Just as Buddha found peace by walking the middle path, so too can you find balance in your relationships by honoring both your love for others and your love for yourself. It's time to reclaim your life. It's time to set those boundaries, not just for your family, but for your peace, for your joy, and for your well-being. You deserve it. Lesson 2: Financial Independence. Protecting your future. As you enter your later years, one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is the gift of financial peace. But all too often, seniors find themselves in a precarious situation, caught between the desire to help their children and the harsh reality of their own financial needs. How many of us, in the name of love, have dipped into our savings, or worse, sacrificed our retirement plans to help our children through their struggles? At first it may seem like an act of kindness, but over time, this cycle of giving can leave you vulnerable, and that vulnerability can turn into a burden. Buddhism teaches us the value of detachment, not in the sense of abandoning the world, but in understanding the impermanence of material things. Buddha himself was not averse to wealth, but he cautioned against the attachment to it. Wealth, like everything else, is fleeting, and it is not the source of true happiness. True happiness, Buddha taught, comes from within. But to protect that inner peace, we must ensure that we are not placing ourselves in harm's way by being overly generous in ways that jeopardize our own stability. Let me share a story of Harold, a 74-year-old man who spent years bailing out his son from bad financial decisions. His son, always in debt, would come to him, promising to repay the money, but never quite following through. At first, Harold didn't mind. After all, he loved his son and wanted to help. But over the years, Harold began to realize something deeply troubling. His own savings were disappearing, and he was getting closer to the day when he would no longer be able to support himself. Harold's security, which he had worked for his entire life, was at risk. One day, after much reflection, Harold made a decision, a difficult one. He stopped handing out money to his son, even though it felt like the hardest thing he'd ever done. He said, "I love you, but I cannot keep sacrificing my future for your mistakes." It was a painful choice, but a necessary one. And as the years passed, something unexpected happened. His son began to take responsibility for his finances. He learned to manage his own money, face the consequences of his actions, and become more self-sufficient. Harold, on the other hand, reclaimed his financial independence. The Buddha's wisdom is clear. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If you continue to sacrifice your financial security for others, you will find yourself in a place where you cannot help anyone, not even yourself. It may seem harsh, but protecting your financial well-being is not just practical, it's an act of love, both for yourself and for those you care about. By securing your own future, you ensure that you will not be a burden to anyone, and you preserve your peace of mind. It's important to remember that helping others is not about offering everything you have. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to say no, to protect your resources, your time, and your emotional energy. The Buddha didn't tell us to hoard wealth, but to live wisely and use what we have with awareness. So, ask yourself, are you prioritizing your own financial security, or are you allowing guilt to cloud your judgment? In the end, the greatest gift you can give your children is not your money, it's your example. By maintaining your own financial independence, you show them how to stand on their own 2 feet, and in doing so, you protect your own peace, your own happiness, and your future. You've earned that security, and you deserve to hold on to it. Lesson 3: Nurturing your passions, reclaiming your identity. As the years pass and the responsibilities of family life take center stage, it's easy to lose sight of who you are outside of being a parent or grandparent. Many older adults fall into the trap of thinking their identity is defined by their role in the family. But what if I told you that you are more than just a caregiver, more than just a helper? You are a unique, vibrant individual with dreams and passions that deserve to be nurtured. In Buddhist teachings, we are constantly reminded to live with mindfulness, to stay true to our authentic selves, and to embrace the present moment with all its richness. But how can you do that if your life has been overshadowed by the needs of others? Let's look at the story of Edward. Edward, at 76, was a retired teacher who had always loved woodworking. His workshop, filled with tools and half-finished projects, was his sanctuary, a place where he could be alone with his thoughts, creating pieces of art that filled his heart with pride. But as his daughter had children, his world slowly began to revolve around them. He started babysitting his grandchildren more and more. What started as a simple act of love turned into a daily routine that consumed him. Before he knew it, Edward had abandoned his passion. His tools lay untouched. His dreams of creating beautiful furniture faded away, and he lost the sense of who he was outside of being a caregiver. One day, a close friend of his, seeing how withdrawn and exhausted Edward had become, suggested he return to his love for woodworking. "You haven't touched your tools in months," the friend said. "What's holding you back?" Edward hadn't realized how much he had sacrificed until that moment. He began to reflect on the Buddhist teaching of the middle path, the idea that we must find balance in all aspects of our lives. By putting all his energy into caring for his grandchildren, he had forgotten to care for himself. It wasn't easy, but Edward began to carve out time each week to work on his projects. The first few days were challenging. He had to relearn how to put himself first, something that had been so foreign to him after years of selflessness. But as he started building again, a transformation took place. He rediscovered the joy he had lost, and even more than that, he found a community of like-minded individuals who shared his love for craftsmanship. He wasn't just a grandfather anymore. He was Edward the craftsman, Edward the creator. The Buddha teaches us that our life is an unfolding process, a journey, not a destination. We are never meant to be stagnant or to give up our passions for the sake of others. Passion isn't just a hobby, it's a part of who we are, and it enriches our lives in ways nothing else can. When we ignore our passions, we deny ourselves a piece of our humanity. It's essential to nurture the parts of ourselves that make us feel alive. For those of you watching, perhaps your hobbies, passions, or dreams have been pushed aside. But let me ask you, when was the last time you did something for yourself just because it made you happy? Life doesn't stop at retirement, and neither should your joy. The Buddha also spoke of impermanence, how everything in life is constantly changing. Our time, energy, and interests are all fluid. But the one constant we can control is how we choose to spend our time. You deserve to live fully, to create, to grow, and to find fulfillment in your own passions. Whether it's painting, gardening, writing, or learning a new skill, don't let the world around you steal your sense of self. By reclaiming your passions, you are not only nurturing your own spirit, but also showing others, especially your children and grandchildren, that it's important to honor who you are, not just the roles you play. So pick up those forgotten hobbies, reignite those dreams, and let the world see the vibrant, creative soul that still exists within you. You are more than enough, and your passions are worth fighting for. Lesson 4. Teaching self-reliance. Empowering your children. As parents, we often believe that our job is never truly done. It feels natural to step in when our children face challenges, to offer financial support, or to solve problems that seem insurmountable. After all, we love them deeply, and their struggles often become our own. But what happens when we shield them from hardship so much that we prevent them from learning how to handle life on their own? In Buddhist philosophy, we are reminded of the importance of balance and non-attachment, not only in our personal lives, but also in how we guide others. The Buddha taught us that life's difficulties are not something to be avoided, but opportunities for growth. Every challenge, every obstacle is a chance to develop wisdom, resilience, and compassion. If we constantly step in to fix things for our children, we may unintentionally rob them of the opportunity to build their own strength. Let me share the story of Frank, a 70-year-old father who had spent decades trying to shield his son from life's difficulties. Frank's son, in his 40s, never really stood on his own 2 feet. Whenever something went wrong, whether it was a job loss, financial troubles, or relationship problems, Frank was there to bail him out. At first, it seemed like love. Frank felt needed, and his son seemed to be grateful for his constant support. But over time, Frank realized that his son wasn't growing. Instead, he was becoming more dependent, and the relationship began to feel more like an obligation than an opportunity for mutual love. One day, after much reflection, Frank made a difficult decision. He realized he was enabling his son's dependence rather than empowering him to be self-sufficient. So Frank decided to stop solving his son's problems. He stopped offering financial help, stopped stepping in to fix things, and instead allowed his son to face the consequences of his actions. The first few months were hard for Frank. His son was upset, angry even, but as time passed, something remarkable happened. His son learned to manage his own finances, to confront his own problems, and to take responsibility for his choices. It wasn't easy, and there were mistakes along the way, but slowly, his son began to grow stronger. The relationship between them shifted from one of dependency to one of mutual respect. Buddha's wisdom encourages us to let go of attachments and to allow others, especially our children, to experience the full spectrum of life. By stepping back and allowing them to learn from their struggles, we give them the greatest gift we can offer, the ability to navigate life on their own. Of course, this doesn't mean we stop supporting our children emotionally. It simply means that we must recognize the difference between offering guidance and taking on their burdens. Just as the Buddha taught that suffering is part of the human experience, we must allow our children to experience their own trials and tribulations so they can develop resilience and wisdom. It's tempting to want to fix everything for them. As parents, we want to protect our children from pain and hardship. But remember, life's struggles are what build strength. In protecting them from every challenge, we may be denying them the opportunity to truly thrive. So, I urge you to reflect. Are you enabling your children, or are you empowering them? By teaching them self-reliance, you help them become the best versions of themselves. And in the process, you free yourself from the never-ending cycle of rescuing, allowing you to focus on your own well-being and happiness. It's a delicate balance, loving your children and teaching them to stand on their own. But in doing so, you give them the tools they need to navigate life with courage and wisdom, and you reclaim your own peace of mind in the process. Empowering your children doesn't mean abandoning them. It means giving them the space to grow into their fullest potential. It's one of the most loving things you can do for both them and yourself. Lesson 5. Emotional independence. Finding joy within. As you grow older, it's natural to long for connection. Your children, grandchildren, and loved ones are an essential part of your life, and their well-being matters deeply to you. However, there is a subtle yet powerful truth that often goes unnoticed. Your emotional happiness should never depend on someone else's actions. Buddhism teaches us that true peace comes from within, not from external circumstances. The Buddha often spoke about the importance of cultivating an inner state of calm and happiness, regardless of what happens in the world around us. But how can you cultivate that inner peace when you're constantly waiting for others to meet your emotional needs? Take the story of Eleanor, a 73-year-old woman who had spent much of her life feeling unappreciated. Every time her son cancelled plans or forgot to call, she felt heartbroken. Her self-worth became tied to how much attention her children gave her, and her emotional state fluctuated with each interaction. If her son was busy and didn't check in, she'd feel abandoned, unimportant. She was waiting for her family to validate her existence, to fill the emptiness she felt inside. One day, Eleanor realized something that changed her life. She was giving away her emotional power. Her happiness, her sense of self-worth, was constantly at the mercy of others. She had placed her emotional well-being in the hands of people who, though they loved her, were living their own busy lives. The Buddha's teachings echoed in her mind. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Eleanor made a decision to change her perspective. Instead of waiting for her son's calls or visits, she began to focus on herself. She rekindled old friendships, joined a social group, and started pursuing hobbies she had long neglected. As she did this, she found something incredible happening. She no longer felt emotionally drained or disappointed when her children couldn't meet her needs. Her happiness began to flow from within, no longer dependent on external validation. And not only that, her relationship with her children became healthier because she no longer placed the weight of her happiness on them. She was at peace with herself. Buddha's wisdom shows us that true happiness is not something we can get from others. It is something we must cultivate ourselves. When you place the burden of your emotional happiness on the shoulders of others, you are not giving them the gift of love. You are giving them the responsibility of your peace. But when you learn to create joy from within, you give both yourself and your loved ones the freedom to thrive. This shift can feel daunting at first, but it's liberating. The Buddha taught that attachment leads to suffering, and this applies not only to material things, but also to emotional dependence. When you attach your happiness to the actions of others, whether it's how often they call, how much they visit, or how they treat you, you open yourself to suffering. But when you release that attachment, you open yourself to a peace that is unshakable. Ask yourself, when was the last time you sought joy from within, rather than from external sources? It could be as simple as taking a walk in nature, enjoying a cup of tea in silence, or even sitting with your own thoughts without judgment. By nurturing your inner happiness, you reclaim the power to live joyfully, regardless of what is happening outside. Emotional independence is not about rejecting your family or disconnecting from them. It's about recognizing that your joy is not their responsibility. You are responsible for your own happiness, and when you take charge of that, you create a life of freedom, peace, and self-respect. And the best part, when you are at peace with yourself, you become a beacon of love and joy for others, without the burden of expectation. Buddha reminds us that you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. It's time to start offering that love to yourself. You deserve it. Lesson 6. Protecting your peace. The power of saying no. In the later stages of life, one of the most powerful acts of self-love you can practice is saying no. It might sound simple, but in reality, it's one of the hardest things to do, especially when you've spent decades saying yes, whether it was to your children, friends, or even strangers. Saying yes, of course, comes from a place of love and compassion. But if your heart says yes while your body and mind say no, you're doing a disservice to yourself and to those you care about. Buddha taught us that peace arises when we release attachment, including attachment to people's expectations. But let's be honest, it's so easy to fall into the trap of guilt when we say no. We fear disappointing others, or worse, feeling like we're not doing enough. But saying yes when you really mean no is an act of self-neglect. In Buddhism, it's often said that we must first take care of ourselves so that we can truly help others. If we don't protect our peace, we lose the ability to share love and compassion in a meaningful way. Let's look at George, a 78-year-old man who spent years saying yes to every request that came his way. Whether it was lending money, watching grandchildren on short notice, or rearranging his plans to accommodate his children's needs, George was always there. At first it felt good. It felt like love. But over time, George began to feel exhausted, unappreciated, and taken for granted. His kindness had turned into an obligation, and his willingness to say yes had drained him emotionally and physically. One day, after feeling particularly worn out and overwhelmed, George had an epiphany. He realized that his life had become a series of sacrifices for others, but at the expense of his own happiness. He wasn't living for himself anymore. He was living for the needs and demands of others. Buddha's teachings on the importance of preserving one's own peace echoed in his mind. So George decided to make a change. He began to say no. He stopped volunteering for every request and started setting limits. And you know what happened? His children and family were initially surprised, but then came to respect his boundaries. They learned that his time, energy, and well-being were just as important as theirs. And here's the kicker. The more George said no, the more his relationships with his family grew in quality. His children began to see him as someone with his own needs, and this led to a deeper, more respectful connection. The love that once felt like an obligation began to feel like a choice again. The act of saying no, in fact, restored his peace and allowed him to be more present, not just for his family, but for himself. Buddha's wisdom teaches us that in order to be truly compassionate and loving, we must first show that same compassion to ourselves. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is a form of self-care. It's about protecting your peace and understanding that your well-being is important. When you say no, you are choosing to honor your own life, your time, and your energy. It's not about rejecting others. It's about creating a healthy space where love can flow freely, without resentment or exhaustion. Think about your own life for a moment. Are there situations where you've said yes out of guilt, fear, or obligation? Are you constantly stretching yourself thin, trying to meet the demands of others while ignoring your own needs? Saying no can be difficult, but it is liberating. It gives you back your peace and allows you to live with intention. As Buddha said, you cannot pour from an empty cup. To be truly present for others, you must first fill your own cup. So I encourage you to practice saying no when it's necessary. It's not just a way to protect your peace. It's a way to honor yourself, your life, and the relationships that matter most. You have the right to live on your own terms, and in doing so, you'll find a new kind of freedom and joy that comes with living authentically and mindfully. By saying no, you open the door to a life that is more balanced, more intentional, and filled with the kind of peace that is rooted in self-respect. It's time to reclaim your peace. Conclusion. Embracing your golden years with wisdom. As you step into the later chapters of your life, it's essential to honor yourself, to nurture your peace, your joy, and your well-being. For years, you've devoted yourself to the care of others, your children, your family, and your loved ones. You've given, loved, and sacrificed endlessly. But now, as the Buddha's teachings remind us, it is time to reclaim your life. It is time to live with intention and purpose, not just for others, but for yourself. Living in harmony with Buddhist principles is about finding balance, the middle path. It's about loving your family deeply, but setting healthy boundaries. It's about helping others when you can, but not at the expense of your own peace and dignity. It's about protecting your emotional and financial independence so that you can continue to live the life you deserve, one filled with wisdom, joy, and self-respect. Today, we've explored 6 powerful lessons that can guide you in this journey: setting clear boundaries, safeguarding your financial security, nurturing your passions, teaching self-reliance to your children, cultivating emotional independence, and embracing the power of saying no. Each of these principles is rooted in the timeless wisdom of the Buddha, and when practiced, they can transform the way you approach your golden years. So I leave you with this. Which of these lessons can you begin to incorporate into your life? How can you start living for yourself, prioritizing your needs while still nurturing loving, meaningful relationships with your family? Take a moment to reflect on the changes you might want to make. Remember, it's never too late to start living a life that honors your inner peace. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share in the comments below how these principles resonate with you and how you plan to apply them in your daily life. Let's continue this conversation about living with mindfulness and purpose as we navigate the beautiful journey of our later years. If you found value in today's video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Quiet Wisdom. Join our community where we explore how to live with the wisdom and compassion that Buddhism teaches us, helping you lead a life of fulfillment, peace, and love. Thank you for watching. May your path forward be filled with light, love, and the quiet wisdom that guides us all.